Okay, it is 12/12, July 16th in Ahihique on the Neil James patio at the LCS property. We are with Tom Falloon and Harriet Hart. And go ahead, Harriet.
Okay. What is your full name?
My full name is John Thomas Falloon. I was born in New York City on the 30th of January in 1943.
Well, okay. Now let me ask the questions.
Okay.
Okay, don't read ahead. What is the highest level of education you achieved?
I graduated in Fine Arts from the University of Mississippi.
Okay. And what was your career prior to moving to Lakeside?
I was working in Mississippi at an agricultural chemical company.
With a fine arts degree?
It was a family business.
Okay. So you were, I'm sorry, I distracted myself. You just,
Number 6.
I know. How long have you lived at Lakeside, visiting temporarily or permanently?
I came to visit 2 or 3 times in the 60s and moved here permanently in 1970. Actually, it was a sabbatical to leave the chemical company and Mississippi for 6 months or a year. And
Okay.
something went wrong, and here I am still.
So how old were you then? Sounds like you would have been about 43,
43 to 70?
maybe in your 20s.
Yes,
Really?
I
So,
like 7 better.
okay. So number 6, what or who made you decide to move Lakeside? Why did you?
Well, my
how did you-
ex-wife, we'd been here visiting. We were going to live in Guadalajara because we lived in a little delta town in Mississippi and wanted a city. But I spoke Italian and my wife could get along in French, but Spanish was non-existent. And so when coming to house hunt, we thought we would live in Ajijic for a while and learn Spanish and then move to Guadalajara.
Okay. So, number 7, where did you live immediately before moving to Lakeside, and for how long did you live there?
Clarksdale, Mississippi, and lived there for most of the 60s.
And why did you leave to come to Mexico?
To get away from the chemical company
Okay.
and to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I still don't know.
What possessions did you bring with you and why?
Well, like most foreigners, you bring the wrong things. Brought 2 babies.
2 babies.
One was 3 months old and one was 2.5 or something like that. 2 dogs, half-size freezer, which was very stupid because there really wasn't any electricity that you could count on. And later on, sent possessions with people that were bringing furniture loads down. And so,
Okay, so did you bring most of your household goods, or?
no, we sold most of them. We kept some antiques that came down, and anyway, what was? Oh, I'm sorry. I just keep moving on.
Don't you do
I
that
can't
now.
remember.
Take that
I
paper
drove-
away from him. Take
Take
it
the
away
paper
from him.
away from.
I drove a Volkswagen bus, and with the dogs, you couldn't get a pencil in it. It was packed to the ceiling with crib and all this kind of stuff, and a few goodies, but most of the goodies came later on. Mainly was baby stuff and a few can't live withouts.
Would you characterize yourself as a hippie back then?
Kind of a semi-hippie. Not, but in Mississippi, that was not looked upon.
No.
This
You're a
was
hippie to be,
a wannabe hippie.
a wannabe hippie, okay.
There were hippies we discovered here. Timothy Leary had come to Ajijic after being kicked out of Oaxaca
Really?
and did experiments with LSD
You're
in
kidding.
conjunction with the University of Guadalajara.
You're kidding.
So I'm told.
You weren't.
This
you
was
weren't-
before
You
me.
weren't one of his subjects.
No,
Okay.
but it was such a small town then with such a small foreign colony. And one rule of thumb was never ask anybody your age what they did, because you really didn't need to know.
What's the implication there?
Well, this was a contact point for a lot of marijuana traffic going to the States. And when I came here, many of the farmers up in the mountains had already been to jail and been caught, but it still was going on.
Huh.
That's interesting.
And we didn't know that. We were innocent, so to speak. So when you say hippie, my hair was a little straggly.
And
but-
you never inhaled.
Okay.
Well, I sure did back then. Let's not put a halo up there yet.
What was the journey like?
Well, just think, a dear friend with my wife and the two babies in one car, and I with the two dogs that had room on the front seat for the two of them, and they weren't real little dogs, they weren't enormous, but the floor, I mean, it was pretty much a nightmare.
Yeah.
It was a long, tedious trip. needless
How long
to
did
say.
it take?
2 days.
Well, that's not so bad.
2.5 days, 2.5 days, I think. And we were very lucky, actually. Driving to the border was a big problem then because they had such tight drug laws in Texas. And even if we drove 16 hours from Ajijic to, and then the kids would go to sleep after Monterrey,
Yeah.
they make us take the babies out. They go through the dirty diaper bags. They take out the seats. Take off the door panels, looking for one seed of marijuana, which didn't make us very happy campers.
Oh.
And especially since the babies then would scream. So anyway,
What did the family members who stayed behind think of your move?
can you imagine?
Yeah, the
They
family
thought we
business.
just- Well, the family business eventually was sold out to the competition.
Did you have a lot of family members you left behind?
No, I'm an only child. My mom had died. My dad had remarried. Actually, he thought we didn't love him anymore, and my in-laws thought we were just totally nuts.
Can you remember your first impressions of Lakeside?
Well, it was paradise. It was gorgeous. This was when the lake was up very high and almost up to the church in Chapala and up this street. And, you know, waves were bursting against the old Posada. It was gorgeous. My only complaint back then was to get to the beach, you had to go through 5 or 6 lines of nets hanging, and you were always crawling under the net. You go to the
Fisherman's
beach, yes, and you couldn't see the beach, you couldn't see the lake because of the fishing nets and fishermen's nets. And but it was gorgeous. There were a group of retired military people. There was a wonderful anecdote. A neighbor of mine was a German-born member of the U.S. Air Force, and his duty at the end of the war was to exterminate General von Dornberger. Well, it turned out that Werner von Braun, who the United States fought over to bring him to the States, his commanding officer was General von Dornberger. And Werner von Braun said, I'll come to the United States if you take my commanding officer. Well, the CIA placed him in Chula Vista. And he died, and his wife died, and she was a diehard Nazi, and not too sociable.
They lived in Chula Vista.
I lived in Chula Vista, and I found this out shortly after I moved here. And 3 doors down the street was the guy whose mission in life was to exterminate von Dornberger, and I thought, oh my God, I'm in the line of fire. And it's just like the first time you hear fireworks, you know, I didn't know there was a military arsenal nearby, or what in the hell are they bombing Ajijic for? I mean, that was because of the fiestas and all this and that. It was...
Did he actually shoot?
No, he didn't shoot, but the bombs going off with the fireworks,
and you
know, and I thought, oh dear God, where have we come to? The babies. I mean, we were just like any other foreigner that comes here, as stupid as you can be, and no doctors. The only doctor in town had very dirty fingernails, and he was kind of the town drunk.
Oh dear, okay.
And
oh dear. Okay, well.
So where did you move to when you were? Where was your first residence?
On Javier Mina, where Mona Lisa used to live. We rented that place for 6 months, and that compound on Javier Mina, I can't remember the bed and breakfast across the street from there. And we had no intention of buying a house, but the house, we'd looked at the house a lot over where I still live, and liked the house. It was 2 houses, 2 little houses, and they decided not to sell it. It was an old American couple, and they said, if we ever do decide, we'll call you, or come by, there were no telephones. And a few months later, they came by, and we ended up buying the house. In the meantime, our house in the States had sold, so we had money to remodel it, put the houses together.
And you're still living there?
Still living there.
So what year did you buy your house?
71.
Wow.
Wow.
39 years?
42.
42? Right, okay.
Don't worry, I signed a check 1989 the other day.
I'm going to move, hey, I've been away on a little. I'm going to move on to this section. The next section deals with Neil James. So the first question is, did you know Neil James personally?
Yes.
You did? And what was your relationship to her? Neighbor, friend?
Well, since we had been living in Mississippi and she was from Grenada, Mississippi, we talked a lot about Mississippi. She had a hellacious southern accent.
Yeah.
And her Spanish was borderline dreadful with the Mississippi accent. She could communicate, and it just didn't matter, her gestures and everything. She was wonderful. She was an adventurer. She loved children. She loved to have the children running all over, which is a little upsetting that they're kind of cordoned off up at the Wilkes Center, because her passion up in the office, that was a library that was always for children, always filled, and she was always, if she wasn't off on an adventure, she was working with the children. She never had children, but she loved what she did. She had another library down on the Six Corners, which I'm sure you all know all that stuff.
Some, but it's not real clear, that history.
But at first, I think she was probably misunderstood. I have a self-portrait of Neil that Joe Fessenden gave me, of Neil standing in front of Paracutin, the volcano. It had exploded the year I was born, and I think she was injured. shortly after, or possibly the same trip. But it's a fantastic picture of Neil Young. But she was just wonderful. She was probably a big hippie herself in her way.
Yeah.
I don't know how she'd be pleased with the situation here now. The modernization, like this roof, it used to be all tile and, filling in all her beautiful lily ponds, her garden also was her passion. And at first I was very upset and thought everything should be the way Neil felt, the way Neil left it. And there were a fair group of us that caused a little friction. But it's a whole different organization now than it was. One thing I wanted to mention, most people that spoke English were 40 years older than we were. So, plus Spanish were my baby's first language. So it behooved us to put our heads together, bang our heads together and study Spanish and learn Spanish. And anybody near our age was Mexican or bilingual. So that really was an entree to the local community for us. Now I'm going.
Well, we're going to move into the Lake questions about the Lake Chapala Society. Did you want to
Did we finish with the Neil James
Well, I
questions?
don't think so. Yeah, there's just this last one, which is tell me about her. So you've told me a little bit. I didn't know she had a thick Southern accent.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Now, how long did you know her? Well, how old was she when you got here? Approximately.
I would have to go look at her dates. Well, she was older, but she was still
Still
very
active?
active and,
She'd have been pushing 70-ish.
yeah. Which, I mean, she was just a child. I just turned 70, so, but she was very young, acting, vital. She brought silkworms to develop silkworms to make silk. And I don't know details, but obviously it wasn't a roaring success, but it fascinated the Mexicans. And there aren't that many foreigners that come here with a burning desire to know Mexico, Mexicans, the culture. And she was a kindred spirit. I didn't come here at that age to hang out with a foreign community. It was wonderful.
So how big would you say it was then?
I have no idea. I'm terrible on estimating numbers.
Half the size it is now, a quarter of the size it is now?
I would say less than a quarter. It was, everybody either had seen each other before or knew each other. At little theater productions, it was all very, the lights would always go out. And Ruthie Boyce was the prompter for 100 years, and people would drink a little too much. And
Where was the little theater?
at the golf course in Chula Vista,
Okay.
at the clubhouse upstairs. So the bathrooms were kind of hanging out the window on the second floor.
Oh dear.
And the acoustics were such that everybody could hear everything, including Ruthie spewing lines out to people and everybody laughing. And so always drank too much, was always drunk, so...
On stage?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
And
dear.
it was just, you never knew whether there'd be luminaria candles in paper bags or kerosene lamps, or possibly it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'd get tired of staying home with kerosene lanterns and candles, and then you'd want to do something. So the Posada closed early, the Tejaban opened up a few years later, and people would come out, women in long dresses and diamonds, and the locals with sawdust on the floor. There was no electricity, so there was no acoustics, but there was always music. think the mariachis charge something like 5 pesos a song.
Oh
and
my goodness. So that was at Chula Vista, you said, where the golf course?
the little theater,
Yeah, okay.
Now, the Tejaban is
Okay, up there, yeah.
up there.
Yeah, on Cavallo, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay.
And so that was the entertainment.
I'm going to start on your memories of the Lake Chapala Society now. Okay, the first question is, what was the Lake Chapala Society like when you first arrived?
You know, my memory is fading badly. I mean, it was a wonderful library, which was predominantly what it was. I mean, it wasn't a gathering point like it is now. It didn't have all the things, and they did have a directory, which was wonderful because, I mean, there was no communication. You'd go around and leave notes on the people's doors, and somebody'd come by or knock on the door, and it seems like my house, sometimes they'd stay for 3 days or something. It was just you never knew what was going to happen.
So the library was here, Neil James lived here. Were the silkworms here? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this was her house.
And the children's art program, you said the children were running around?
Well, up where the offices are, that was a library, and then, I don't know where they painted, but they painted all over.
Okay.
But in 1970, the Lake Chapala Society should have still been in Chapala.
It was, yes, and I'm fuzzy about when it moved here.
Okay.
I'm fuzzy when I became a member. I think I probably always have been a member.
Did you join in Chapala?
I think so, but you know, I'm fuzzy, Terry, on that. I really don't remember.
Where was it in Chapala?
I
Do you
don't
remember that
have a
either?
clue.
Okay. But eventually they created a relationship with Neil and they moved. They shared the property with her, and you remember that.
Yes, and I used to come down and visit with Neil fairly frequently. And of course, she wasn't very interested in the foreign colony at all, unless there was something. I mean, her passion was Mexico, traveling, the children, this and that, and so that's what we mostly talked about. And
Okay.
Okay. So the LCS questions, there's only a couple more. Do you recall what need it met in the community?
well, it was the only place where Americans or Canadians, foreigners could congregate, meet each other. It was just a place to come and ask questions, which it still is.
Yeah.
It's just grown.
Are you currently a member?
I am. I forgot to join till late,
Oh dear.
and I think I'm in the supplement, and I always forget. And
Well, I
need
found
to
you in
do
one
it.
of them. Well, I always keep the back directory so that if somebody's not in the current one, I always look at the old ones. Have you seen the organization evolve?
oh, definitely, it's grown greatly.
Yeah.
And I realize that I've lived here so long, I have predominantly Mexican friends, so I don't make use that much of the services as I probably should. The directory is very helpful, except many people have decided not to join. And of course, being a grouchy old timer, I still think we should get a discount.
For grouchy old timers.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll take that to the board.
Yes, they did for several years put
Oh, yeah?
a star on your, and I just thought, well, thank you.
A star. So one more question about LCS. Do you think there's an important role for LCS to play now and into the future?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And any opinions I might have, I mean, one of my missions forever has always been to try to join the Mexican and foreign communities, which is a lesson in futility. I know many foreigners that don't need Spanish. They can use sign language and a big smile and get along anywhere. Others panic if they're in a group of Mexicans. And it's always the paranoia, they're gonna steal from me, they're gonna do this or that. And it's kind of weird to watch a grown foreigner, especially a man, terrified because a Mexican's talking to me and I don't understand what he's saying. And this happens all the time. Of course, there are the people that brag about, oh, you don't need Spanish to live here. Until you have a car wreck, until you get stopped by the police or get sick, or, you know, down the list. So, needless to say, there's always a ringing phone or an email. Could you help me with this? Could you help me with that? And I do, providing it's good friend. If other people ask, I usually say something rude, like $100 an hour for translating or something. But anyway, it's coming as a young person, and that's why I ask about Palfreys, because they were young when they came here. Dale has history to her grandmother.
And Eagers, too, I think.
Oh, the Eagers are, according to me, newcomers.
Oh.
But they were, you know,
Yeah.
came a few years after. And there's many people, I know 2 or 3 people that, well, one girl in particular who came here her parents brought her at 1 year old, and she grew up here, and she kind of comes and goes.
Who is that?
Anita Vertefe, her mom had Lois Cugini's store,
Interesting.
and her dad ran the Tejaban, which was called, oh Lord, it's gone.
I should write her name down. Do you think we should talk to her?
Well, she's in Oregon.
Okay.
Her
But you say she
granddaughter
comes back
just
and-
died of cancer.
But you say she comes back and forth, so
Yeah,
maybe
she
the
has
next
a
time
house
she's
here.
here,
and-
you could
and
let us
she'll-
know.
Then Susan Nunes.
Let's
grew
not
up
jump
here.
ahead too fast.
No.
Now, let's stick
Okay.
with the script.
Okay.
Okay, let's stay with the script and I'll give you a
Okay.
few names.
Okay. So these next two questions are about the environment. Describe the quality of the physical environment of Lakeside then and now. The physical environment.
Well, back then, there were hardly any automobiles. And at least 2 children got run over each week because nobody understood what a car was.
Yeah.
Hey, there were no deaths, but well, there were a few deaths. I know of one girl that had seen the brother of a friend of mine and thought he was real handsome, and she saw his car coming along the highway and stepped out in front of him, and he had nothing to do, no way to avoid running her over and killing her. I mean, it was that, I'd say half or 3/4 of the village had not been ever to Guadalajara.
Yeah.
And the movie theater on the plaza, which is the Umbrellas, came along in the late 60s. Before that, where Tango was, that was the movie theater, and they'd hang a sheet. And it was an open courtyard, and you'd bring a pillow or a stool. It was wonderful. Each sidewalk was different. I was taught to walk down the middle of the street, which was full of holes, and there were animals loose in the street, and march, lift my feet up real high, so no matter what I stepped on, whether it was poop or a big hole, I wouldn't kill myself. And there weren't street lights, and the curbs all were very high. It was so to channel the rainwater, so it was a bit of an adventure.
So you mentioned animals. I'm just curious, were there more birds? Was there more wildlife around?
The first time my dad came to visit, he said, I think I'm going to stick my head out the door to see what's going on. Well, they were bringing the cows down to drink out of the water. This cow pushed the door and knocked my dad on his butt. And, you know, it was pretty funny.
So they
But
brought
there-
the cows down to the lake
You know,
to drink?
and the horses, and there were always a few pigs in the street. And
Pigs?
Yeah, everybody had a pig. A pig
Chickens?
was, oh, of course. And my neighborhood had roosters that would crow between 2 and 3 in the morning. Not the later ones, but, and my housekeeper or cook always knew all the animals in the neighborhood, the pigs, and who fed the pigs what. And she would place her order a few months before they slaughtered the
Because
pigs.
she knew which pigs were fed.
Good pigs, were well taken care of.
Oh dear.
Electricity was pretty iffy. So, and like I said, we brought a small freezer down thinking that was wise, but almost went bankrupt having to cook all the meat we'd bring from Guadalajara. You had to go to Guadalajara and buy stock in the telephone company to get a telephone back in those days. And somehow or other my neighbors had waited for 5 years for a telephone, and then when the telegram came through, they said, well, why do we want it? It's just gonna be our kids asking for money. Let them write a letter. Anyway, so
What about water quality of the lake and I mean, what?
The lake was
You're
gorgeous.
describing a domestic town when and not anything wild as you talk. You're talking about the horses and the pigs and stuff. What about the water birds? What about the cotamundis? What about, I mean, did you have any
I have
exposure?
never seen a cotamundi, but my house seems to have tlacuaches or possums, full of possums. There were a good friend and several other people I knew swam across the lake. I used to go water skiing on it and had been swimming in the lake before, and back then there were huge rocks along the beach, and the women would carry their big baskets of clothes and wash their clothes on the flat rocks, and the kids would play in the water, and Mom would give them a little soap and they'd bathe in the lake.
So would you do that today? I mean, do you think there's a difference in water quality?
Oh, definitely.
Did you eat fish out of the lake?
Oh,
Do you
definitely.
eat-
I was here when there were still whitefish in the lake. And, the lake seemed to be quite clean back then, but I still wouldn't drink. The lake was clean, and the water system, the agua potable, wasn't very clean. Now I think the city water isn't that bad. They chlorinate it. Of course, they give the kids in school pills twice a year or something like that. And they used to have, and this was before my time, commerce on the lake, boats, low-slung, wide boats that would travel, and some friends from Guadalajara had bought one and fixed it up as a party boat.
So they moved freight from town to town
Uh-huh.
because the roads were crappy.
Well, I don't think the highway came in until the late 50s. There was a dirt road, and then they paved it, and then for many years, including when I came here, the road was flooded in the curves before Chapala, and they finally bulldozed a one-lane dirt road with a little pull-off in the middle, and all the buses and trucks, if you'd meet head-on, somebody'd have to back up to the pull-off. It was just, one thing in the rainy season, it was a mud hole, and then in the dry season, until the lake went down, it was just this dust cloud. It was just not too pleasant. We were at the point of leaving a car in Chapala, thinking, are we going to be, because down by the Piedra Baranada and San Juan Cosala, the water was halfway across the highway too, so we were almost trapped.
Okay, I've got one more question in this section, and that's the social environment. Then and now.
Well, there's always been an A class.
Yeah.
What is that?
God only knows, dear. I mean, since I've really never been retired, I've always kind of avoided the cocktail dinner party. It's only with a few special friends that I'll go out at night or something like that. And but there were a lot of cocktail parties and dinner parties, and well, these people that were here were most of them older than my parents, say, and still had that fancy, get up and get dressed all up, and they, the same little group of people would see each other 4 or 5 times a week. I thought that was a little boring. I did like a lot of them, and it was awful nice to be able to speak English. Of course, anybody under 40 were the young darlings, and they wanted young people to be at their parties, and they were wonderful. But they were in their own little group. But there was a group of military, then a group of people, quite a few people came here after Castro took Cuba over. There were 3 or 4 families. One lady who recently passed away, her husband was the head of Coca-Cola, I think, and that was taken away from her, and she was given several, her husband was murdered.
They were Cubans?
No, they were Americans.
They were
had businesses in Cuba. There was a hotel owner or a casino owner, and a couple other people that had worked with major companies in Cuba. And so it was a more than anything, there were people that had lived in other places, other countries, and a little bit more used to inconveniences of a third world country. It was primitive here. Most houses did not have a refrigerator. People did their shopping every day. The lake was definitely a part of the community. The lake's always been very dangerous for even for boating with the plants that grow up. There's all kinds of roots and everything. A very good friend drowned right out in front of the old Posada. Just disappeared in front of everybody. And things like this, it was dangerous, and but still it was part, the fishermen would go out at 4 or 5 in the morning and be coming back at sunrise, and it was definitely a part of the lake.
You use the word third world nation. Do you still consider this area third world?
Oh, definitely in certain places.
How about Ahiki?
There's some extreme poverty in Ahihik.
But third world and poverty aren't necessarily connected. Third world is really the technologies and the infrastructure and the governance and all that sort of stuff.
Well, there's still a lot of third world in the States when you get into West Virginia and Kentucky.
Well, I agree.
And, Guadalajara was another world. And still, when you drive to Guadalajara, you see some of the most primitive existence. And I think the people back from when they had the migrant worker program, and I don't remember whether it was the 40s or 30s or 40s or 50s, when it seemed like half the town went up there, and a lot of the old people are still getting U.S. Social Security checks from the time they spent. So this town has had a lot of back and forth mainly with California.
Yeah.
And if the U.S. government had any clue on how easy it is to sneak across the border, still today, I know many people that tried it just for the fun of it, to see if they could do it. And they have their ways.
How about the social environment now? Social.
Mexican or foreign?
Both. How would you describe it now?
Well, the Mexican community is very worried that the old traditions are disappearing. So they're really coming together to try and restore, dig out the new traditions. I think they're doing an excellent job. That parade, that night parade on the Day of the Dead was pretty good with the torches and everything. And the foreign community loved it as well. And that's one of the things I think brings everybody together with the traditions. Of course, people complain continually about the cohetes, the boom booms, and that's just the way it is. It's their culture, and that's the way they do it, and right or wrong. And like everybody is starving to death. There's no work or there's no anything. But boy, if there's a reason to celebrate, there's enough money for beer. Which I'm sure in the foreign community is pretty much the same thing. You know, things are so bad, well, let's get a bottle and come over to my house or something like that. I don't know. I gave up drinking a long time ago.
Okay, now I'm going to swing into, I'm looking at the clock, and this is a long section, and this is the last section.
Okay.
Okay, we got 20 minutes here.
Oh dear.
And 14 questions. So, what are the 3 most important world events that have happened while you have lived in Mexico? World events you can remember.
Let me turn that off. That's my telephone.
Thought you had a cat in your pocket.
I was going to say, your pocket's screaming.
May I just say I'll call you back?
Yes.
Over there, hang on. Anyway, that's all right.
World events.
World events, well, I would say that affected here would be the Mexico City earthquake was one. I'm trying to think. The wars, Afghanistan, Iraq. Mexico, all of a sudden, on your question on the third world, and I really don't like that term, because Mexico is first world in many ways. But it's as primitive as it was 500 years ago in other ways. And the simpler the life, I think the happier the people are. Mm-hmm. I mean, I really enjoy the Mexicans in this village that have, well, they have very little. And I had to be careful in the very beginning if I said, hey, Terry, that's a great shirt. You take it off and give it to me. Even if, you only had 2 more. I mean, that's the way they are.
Yeah.
City people are different. They're like city people anywhere. God, you're going to watch onto this. You're going to steal it. And anyway.
Okay, well, you've only
I
okay.
didn't say that much.
Well, I'm going to go on to what do you love about Mexico?
I just think it's the combination of all the cultures. I graduated in fine arts, so the arts and crafts. I've got to know many artisans all over Mexico, and I've been to their homes, and they've been to mine, and I'm blown away by music, crafts of this country, and how nice everybody is, how friendly, how willing to see the fear in the foreigner's eyes. If they would only smile, everything would change. But living above the new posada, I say, buenos dias, and you'd think I pulled a knife on them. I mean, it's really...
Oh dear.
And of course, I have a little perverse side to me which loves to spat off a little Spanish at them and see if I can get them running in their high heels back home.
Okay. Did you interact frequently with the Mexican community? I think you've already told us that. And in what ways?
I have a lot of godchildren, social, everything. They tell me I'm more Mexican than the nopales. They always say, oh, Tomas is not foreign, he's Mexican. And that was because I was in my 20s, I was young.
So what happened to your family? What happened to your wife and kids?
Well, she loved it, I loved it, and she really didn't. She was quite a feminist. I hope this won't come out anywhere she would see it. She's a short Toran woman, so just a bit feisty. But she wanted to go home.
She took the kids?
Yeah, but she would send them for a month at Christmas and 3 months every summer.
So what year did they leave?
I would say probably about 75. And
Do they still speak Spanish?
oh yeah, they both actually, well, one teaches Spanish, one does a lot of work with Spanish.
And they moved back to Mississippi?
Oh God, no. My ex-wife lives in Washington, D.C., and my oldest daughter and the youngest daughter lives in Connecticut. And of course, with all these kids, my older daughter married a Turkish fellow who was born in Russia. So then 4 languages going on in that house. I have a feeling that the grandchildren probably will know Spanish and not Turkish or Russian. Although there is a grandmother and some relatives still in Turkey. So we'll see what happens.
I think we're on to the Mexican community, and I think you've already told us that they are welcoming and friendly to you, and they think of you as one of them. This next question, name a few Mexicans that have touched your life here.
Oh, good grief. Well, all the artists that worked, the current artists, all studied with Neil James. And so we're all real good friends.
We're looking for names.
Well, the Lopez Vega brothers. Now you're pushing on my weak side, my faded brain. Efrain Gonzalez, all the,
The guys
whole
on the
group.
mural.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. That's the difference.
No, but Julia Ramos
Yeah.
and the whole España family. Manuel was a houseboy and for this lady from Louisiana down the street from my house, and she taught him all these crazy recipes that they're still using in the restaurant. And but Julia was an amazing lady. She was a regidor on the government, and she was illiterate, and she still could get what she wanted. I think the politicians in Mexico should all be women. I would get a lot more done.
Not just in Mexico, maybe. Okay, who were the early expats that influenced the community?
Well, Neil first and foremost. Zara La Rusa. She lived in a dream world, had a gold mine with the youngest officer in Pancho Villa's army. And she wouldn't tolerate anybody that drank. But Timothy Leary stayed down at the gold mill, and of course all the drugs people she thought were wonderful.
This is the Russian lady.
Yeah, whose name was Frances Brundridge, and she was born in Virginia.
Okay.
She was an amazing character. Helen Kirtland was another one of the ladies of Ajijic that came in and ran the looms. And it was pretty amazing back then.
Yeah.
The smells were just wonderful. Mesquite burning, the sounds of women making tortillas, looms clacking. Of course, in a few places you could hear the garbage. I shouldn't say this, but I will. You could hear the kerchunk of trash compactors while they were baling up marijuana in kilo blocks. Could
Are you
hear-
serious?
I'm serious.
Wow.
A friend, baby.
What happened to those days, man?
Well,
We'll do that for a different session.
Yes.
yes.
You're worth at least
You're
2
filming
sessions.
me.
Okay, I don't know whether I asked you this, I mean, this question has popped up back and forth, so I crossed it out once. But how would you describe the expat community back then? I think we've done that.
Yeah.
And
Well, it was a
now-
lot more united because, well, of course, the hippies weren't going to get along with the A group.
No.
And they all wore patchouli oil. And then the ex-military kind of, well, there were always border promotions and things like that. But I don't know. It was much smaller, and you kind of knew everybody, or you had seen them, or knew they lived way out in Vista del Lago.
Did they live in different places? Like, did the military community live in one section, for
Well,
example?
at first, they started out in Chula Vista, lower Chula Vista.
Yeah.
And then, there was always people that lived in, wanted a view, couldn't live without a view. I just can't understand, and I'm not a golfer, my father was. But to move all the way out to Vista del Lago and have to drive that, what used to be a horrible highway, just to be able to go out. I guess if you love golf, that's not shabby at all.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think you've described the expat community now.
It's a little bit of everything. I'm a little shocked and horrified at things that happen, and it just seems Ajijic has grown up a whole lot. To have a place like the Red Piano where people seem to love to go there.
Oh, they do, don't they?
And I'm just kind of, you've got to be kidding. I mean, it's not that they didn't have drag shows 30 years ago, and the Mexicans just loved them. But that's neither here or there. It's very, well, there's the artistic group, there's a golf group, there's a tennis group, there's a course bridge and all that goes with it, duplicate and regular, and everything there's whatever you want. I have never been on Chapala.com.
Me neither.
I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff I don't need to know. It seems like I'm weeding out stuff in my head rather than bringing in more.
So all change has positive and negative elements. Can you think of some of the positive changes that expats have brought to Lakeside?
Well, money, of course, and I think that with communication the way it is now with the computer and internet, you can live anywhere in the world you want and somehow be in touch. My children forced me to get a computer, and I'll use it for the very basics and end up playing backgammon and hearts and all this kind of stuff on the computer rather than Googling everything I hear. They brought a whole lot. Before, you used to have to go to Guadalajara, and it was a 2-lane highway, and it was a nightmare. And it took over 20 years to build the 4-lane highway.
Yeah.
With the 6-year presidency, the first 2 years is to work for the country, second 2 years is to tread water, last 2 years are to steal. So they say, quote, I'm quoting somebody else. The corruption is pretty bad here.
But it seems that you can collaborate or corroborate that little dicho.
Oh yeah, a Mexican told me that. So listen, stupid, this is the way it is here. And, but it's brought services that I never dreamed. It was a big deal if somebody would arrive from up north and bring me some Snickers. Now that you can buy them in every little tienda, I don't eat Snickers. Same with raspberry jam.
Okay, can you think of some negative changes that the expats have brought?
I'd always said the day they put in the first red light, I'm out of here. And it was on my corner that they put it in, and I was so grateful because I finally could get on the highway.
Yeah.
Of course, you had to get out of the car and push the button, the pedestrian button. But I go to Walmart. A few old-time friends would rather drop dead than...
Yeah.
And actually one who was the biggest protester did pass away. But I go. It's very convenient. And of course I don't know anything about half the American brands, so I never buy them. I just buy what I, you know.
Do you still shop in the little local grocery store?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, and we've got about 5 minutes here, and we've got 3 questions.
Okay, I'll be
I
fine.
think we've talked about how the community has evolved. What would you like to see happen here?
Well, like I said before, I'd love to see more integration between the two communities. I have no suggestions, I have no ideas, except I do realize, I used to be very snotty is the only word I can think of. I'm sure there's a better word about foreigners that didn't make a sincere effort to speak Spanish. Now I realize I do well here because I came at such a young age that I kind of grew up here in many ways. It would be very difficult for you guys to go to a Mexican party and sit out in a rock in a field of dirt or something like this, where the way they do, and you know, you'd be like a fish out of water. And whereas I know the people, and you know, it's to try and bring them together. I know many people try, but it's very difficult.
Can you predict what Lakeside will be like in 10 years?
I hate to think. People I know from Guadalajara are moving out. It's just as easy to commute to factories on this side of Guadalajara than to drive across town. And the schools are better here than they used to be. Everything is, I don't know. I heard a real estate agent about 10 years ago said, this place will be dead in 10 years. And I don't think it. Adios, guapachosas. Excuse me. I keep forgetting online. I hope that they will come together more. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a big guess. I don't know. The idea of having movie theaters, when this movie theater opened, or I came a year or two afterwards, and the fellow's wife would cook at intermission. There'd be 2 English-speaking movies once a week. And Carolina, you would order what you wanted to eat in intermission, and she made lemon meringue pies with high meringues and incredible pies and this and that, and sandwiches and lunches, and just incredible food. So you'd eat like a pig in intermission. There were wooden seats. The movies were so scratchy that you really needed to be bilingual to read the subtitles. And you had the Mexicans sat upstairs on the balcony and would throw things, so you always had to sit underneath the balcony or else get bombarded. And now we have, how many?
Air conditioning.
9 or 10 movie theaters, and they both play the same movies, and videos cost 20 pesos each, so why?
Yeah. One more question.
Yes,
We're out
ma'am.
of time. Who else should we interview?
We've got the Palfreys.
I do.
Susan Nunes might be good. I don't know whether she's here or not.
Nunes?
Noonis.
Okay.
You might put in parentheses Dennis. That's her maiden name. Her husband passed away a few years ago. Her stepmother lives here too. But she was brought here as a child. I knew her, and then she married, and they moved back here to retire, and he died. They're younger than I am. And she could give some young Ahihi.
Yeah.
And I think she'd be a good one to do.
Okay, Susan Nunes.
Dennis. She
Dennis.
lives over, you know where the cross is? On the street that you come down and come around up here.
Just the next
Yeah,
one.
yeah. There's a house on the corner on the east side, and she's the second property up. She comes and goes. She has a new grandchild, so she's going back and forth.
Yeah.
And
Okay, anybody else?
Anita's not here.
Who's Anita?
Anita Verta Fue. And who knows when she's coming back? You're not still taping, are you? Or,
It's just about to finish.
oh,
We're just about done.
okay. Well, if she comes back, I'll let you know.
Okay, I was just gonna say, if you can think of anybody, you have my email address
I
now.
do.
Yes.